Why were Somalis expected to pay for every baby boy that was born? We are going to read a part of a book that was published in 1921 that explains these requirements on the Somalis. Now, the book I'm reading at the moment is titled Sand, Sand and Somals, and it was written by an individual by the name Major Henry Rain. And this individual was a district commissioner at Zeila in the 1910s and probably 1920s. And this book was a journal that he used to keep, and then later on he decided to turn it into a book. This individual was a British official, and that, of course, means we have to be very cautious about the things that he writes or the things that he wrote in this book. But nevertheless, I think it's a useful book, especially if we want to understand the things that used to happen, and at least if we want to understand the perspective of the Europeans who came to the lands of the Somalis, especially the colonizers. Now, the part we are reading is chapter 13 of the book, and the chapter is titled The Yibir. Now, maybe that gives you tells you what that's all about if you understand the Somali society. Let's read and see what the book says. It says, before the war, I lived in southern Somaliland, where the Sab, or the outcast tribes of the northern Somaliland, are seldom met with. And it so happened that the first representative of the Hunter people, the Midgans, whom I came across was the old pot woman in Zeila. Now he's talking about, he calls them the outcast tribes, of course. That's not the way we can characterize these groups of people today. It's very disrespectful. But this is a class of people that existed in very many societies, almost all societies in Eastern Africa, actually, and the Horn of Africa. And he says the first person he met who was of Midgan class or Midgan, we could say grouping, was a lady who used to do pottery at Zealand. There is a part of in this book where he talks a lot about that lady actually, and how she was so good at creating pottery. He continues, and as for my first Yibir, it was here I met and nearly passed him by. So the first Yibir he came across was in southern Somalia. He continues, it is customary for the Midgan who live by hunting to attach themselves to a Somali family for protection, for which they pay by acting as hewers of wood and drawers of water. The Ibir are much more sophisticated and prefer, if possible, to live by their own wits instead of soiling their hands by honest toil, which is an interesting way to put it, actually. But it's basically saying the midgun will usually attach themselves to a family, and then that's how they live. They have this symbiotic kind of like relationship. They do something and the family provides security in return. But the Ibir, for some reason, were more independent. They prefer living on their own and surviving through some things that are going to be explained in this part that I'm reading. He continues, Somals will not mix or intermarry with either tribe and look upon them as of inferior caste to themselves. Just like the other societies in East Africa used to look at these different categories of people. The Masa used to consider the Ndorobo to be beneath them and the Elkonono to be beneath them. The Kikuyu have not understood how the Kikuyu took the Adi and the Ndorobo, but they also never consider them to be actually their equals. So it's a very common way of existence, or it's a common relationship in the Eastern African and the Horn of Africa. He continues, this is how I nearly missed my Yubir. My cook and I had been going through the weekly accounts. He accused me of eating 12 eggs and 3 pounds of meat every single day of my life, and I accused him of carelessness in his method of handling the truth and of extravagance in managing my commissariat. So they were arguing with this cook. The cook was saying, you are eating too much. It was kind of like a petty argument. One ever gets at one ever gets but little change out of a cook. And when mine proved he was an honest man, and that I was the glutton to his own satisfaction and my stupefaction, it was a bad moment for Gulaid Abokor to choose to come to me to borrow money. So he's arguing with his cook over some money and how they are spending money. I think at some point he was trying to accuse the cook of maybe stealing some of the money or some of the things that they had bought. But then they do accounts, and it's very clear that there's nothing missing. It's just that this individual was eating too much. The British officer was eating too much, and seems like his ego was somewhere. He didn't want to accept it. And at that point, somebody called Gulaid Abokar comes. He came and stood below my veranda, carving to attract my attention. He did, but he would not go away. So he comes, Abubakar or Abokar Gulaid stands outside in the veranda, and he's trying to catch the attention of this British officer. But this guy is not in the mood because he has been arguing with his cook. Sahib, I am in trouble. I must see you. So Abokar says. Gulaid Abokar, I replied, the trouble you are in now is nothing to that you will find yourself in. You find yourself in presently if you don't go right now and take that villainous looking companion of yours with you right out of my compound. So Abokor was not alone. He had come with some individual that this European did not recognize, and he did not want strangers around in his compound, seems like. And he tells Abokor, go get out that guy. I don't want to see him in my compound. I can't take him away, Sahib. He's a Ibir and is the cause of my trouble. I must see you. So he tells him, I can't chase him away from your compound. He's a Ibir, and that's why I'm in trouble and I need your help. I was so foolishly angry that I nearly fell over the veranda. I had barely recovered myself when I heard Guled say, Sahib, I've just had a baby. It was really so funny that I had to forget the cook and my bad temper in a hearty laugh. Come up here, you freak, I said, and tell me all about it. So he's angry, but then he's told, I have a baby, or I've gotten a baby. And now his mood kind of like changes, and he's like, okay, let me hear you. He came, Sahib, he said, I've just had a baby boy, and the Yibir has come. So I think Abokor Gulaid is doing what is usually called in communication, or is what is happening here is what is called a curse of knowledge. Abokor is assuming that this European guy has the same background information like Abokor has about the meaning of the Yibir being around. The British guy does not get it. I have no rupee in the house. Will you lend me four, please? Now, thanks to the cook episode, I was in a suspicious mood and not inclined to part with 4 silver rupees without proper investigation. So I called Mohammed, the interpreter, at once, together with Burale, who came with several other invited guests to assist in providing me with the following true facts. So remember, he was arguing with his cook about finances, and now there's this guy who comes, he wants some money from him. He's suspicious that probably this guy wants to take advantage of me, and he decides he's going to ask around about whatever he's telling him. Abokor made a mistake also because he assumed this European would understand or had the same background information like he, and that's called actually the curse of knowledge. Is something that when you learn communications, you have to learn to avoid. And now Mohammed comes with Burali. Burali is the police inspector at Zayla. They come and they start to explain to him what is happening here. Even Burali is prepared to take a divorce oath that they are true. So Burale tells him, I'm betting it's true. Now they're going to giving him the background info, feeding him with the backdrop that he needs in order to understand Abokor at this moment. He writes, the first Yibir that ever was a sorcerer, and used to say there was nothing God will do for him nor enable him to do. He lived ever so long ago in the time of Sheikh Ishaq, a noble Arab who fled to Somaliland from Mecca 600 years ago, and who is the founder of one of the most powerful Somal divisions or clans. The Yibir did so many wonderful things that the Sheikh sent for him to come to a small hill between Berbera and Hargeisa, but nearer to Hargeisa than Berbera, and there the two men met. Now, this is a story I've read in another book actually. I can't remember which book, but I've read this story in another book explained in the similar manner, and maybe not exactly the same, but the story is the same. Now, of course, they are telling him about the origins of the Yibir here. So they are telling him about the ancestor of the Yibir people. He continues, said Sheikh Isaac to the Yibir, is it true all I hear concerning you, that there is nothing you cannot do? It is true, said the Yibir. Now, I am not disputing with you, said Sheikh, but I would like to see a demonstration. Can you go through that hill? I can, said the Yibir. He went into the hill and came out on the other side. The sheikh was astounded and said, let me see you do it again. And the obliging Ibir did it again. The sheikh thought and scratched his head, but could think of nothing better to say than, let me see you do it again, let me see do it once more. And of course the Ibir, who was highly flattered by the impression he had made on such a great man as the sheikh, went into the hill again, but before he could get through, the sheikh held up his hands to heaven and said quickly, oh God, don't let him come out. And the Yibir never came out. Now the Yibir had a son who came to the Sheikh and said, what's this I hear about you and my father? Is it true? It is quite true, my boy, said the Sheikh. Well, now you have killed him. What about the compensation dear that is coming to me for his death? The sheikh agreed the boy ought to receive some compensation, and further that as he had killed the sorcerer in an interest of the community ought to pay. So he decreed, this holy man, that whenever a Somal married, he was to pay a skin to a Ibir as part of the deer due to that people for the killing of their ancestor. Further, whenever a male child was born, its father was to pay another skin. Now, in those days, there was no money. That was why the sheikh said the Ibir were to be paid in skins. But nowadays, it is more convenient to give them money, 4 rupees, 6 rupees, something like that. So that's the origin of it. So when a baby boy is born, a Ibir comes along with a long stick, which he balances on the back of his hand. Then the stick runs along his arms and balances on its shoulder, and balances on his shoulder. When the father of the baby sees this, he knows the man before him is a Ibir without doubt, and he pays him 4 rupees, 6 rupees, something like that. After some in After some incantations, the Ibir goes to the bush and cuts some tiny sticks, which he sews up in a bit of skin. He is very particular as to the number of these sticks. They must be more than two and less than four, and when they are made up in the skin, he hands them to the child's parents, who tie the package on the baby's arm. It is called makran. And if any other Yibir come along, the mother shows it to them, and they know they will not get anything more from that baby, for more for that baby. But if a new baby boy comes and the parent cheat the Yibir out of his dues, something dreadful is bound to happen. Now, as Gulaid Abokor wife has just presented him with a bouncing baby boy, and as Gulaid and all his friends have spent more this new year than they can afford and are out of cash. And as other are careful such, I find the cook has left me with 4 rupees in hand. It will be a pity if anything were to happen to the baby, so I lend the money. Mohammed then confides a tremendous secret to me. Now, there is something else that Mohammed is going to tell him about the Yibir. Now, that is, and I'm going to read. Now, that's how that culture started. But I was wondering, is it still happening? And I would like to hear people write, or people I would like to read in the comment section whether that's a practice that is still ongoing, and is it ongoing everywhere, or maybe if you go into the rural areas of the lands of the Somalis, you are likely to run into that practice, but maybe in the more urban areas or other areas that culture is dead. Or and maybe another question is, was this happening in every parts of the Somali, or in every parts of the lands of the Somalis, or was it some particular parts that had this culture? Those are some of the questions that came into my mind when I was reading this part of the book. Now, let's read and see what Mohammed has as a secret to tell to this individual. He says, now this is Mohammed being quoted. I tell you, sir, and Mohammed was the translator of this British guy. I tell you, sir, what I am going to tell you now is a fact, and I am prepared to pass my oath on the Quran that it is true. This same Yibir came to my house last night and said, let me tell you your luck. I said, good. He told me to take a new loincloth and 4 rupees from my box and accompany him to another house. I went with him, taking the articles, for I feared a trick. When we entered a house, he said, spread the cloth on the ground. I spread it on the ground. And he said, now put the 4 rupees on it. I put them on. He then took a thread from the cloth I was wearing and rolled it into a small ball, which he kept in the palm of his hand. He said, if your luck is good, this thread will turn into a lock of human hair. If it is bad, it will turn into a human eye. I watched him very closely, for I still feared a trick. He closed his hand, opened it quickly. Voila, the thread had turned into a human hair. That's some sort of magic. And magic here does not mean that maybe there is a way he basically made Muhammad not to realize what is up. He tricked him. I think, if you ask me, probably that's what he did. And these are tricks, of course, that happen all over the place, and people call them magic. Then he picked up a new cloth and the 4 rupees, saying, as your luck is good, this is my commission. Now, what do you think of that, sir? Personally, I think he was conned. Personally, I think he was conned. Maybe that's not how he saw it, of course. Clearly, that's not how Mohammed saw it. He thinks that this guy had some magic powers, but I think he was conned. Now, I think, Mohammed, said I, that there are as indifferent rascals and just as big fools in Somaliland as any other part of the world. So basically saying these things happen everywhere, and there are people who are gullible to be tricked, and there are people who are willing to trick others, especially if they want to gain or they are looking to gain. Now he finishes. This morning I passed Gulaid Abokor's slim young wife and noticed the baby she carried on her back was wearing a neat new makran on his arm. Said I to myself, I wonder who pays the bill, his fee for that makran, baby's father or I? Now he's wondering, it's me who gave the money. Does it mean it's me who paid for the baby's makran, or is it the father who paid? I think it's the father who paid because it was a loan, it was a debt. It did not give him like, and maybe if he gave him as not a loan, that's not what Abokor wanted. Abokor wanted to be some money to be given to him that he will return later on. He continues, I have my doubts, but baby's mother looked so happy and smiled so sweetly that I'll forgive Guleda Bokor if he never pays me back. So he's saying, because looking at the mother and the baby and how the mother was happy, he didn't mind if Abokor never paid. Like, it was maybe thought it's worth it. I did a good thing there. So that's the origins of that practice. And again, I'm asking, is it something that still goes on today, or this is an old practice that stopped? And is this something that happened everywhere in the lands of the Somalis, or is this something that happened in specific parts, specific clans, for example? But maybe those clans have stopped, or maybe still continues in some ways. These are some of the questions that I have about this, and I'll be very happy to read the comments and see what people have to say about this practice. Now, you can check my pinned comment, check the description box, check my profile bio for a link to where I put some of the books that I read on this channel. I've not put all the books, it's work. I still try to put some when I get time, and I'll continue growing that list. And yeah, you can check there to see some of the books that I covered on this channel. Those are my random thoughts.